On today's show, the Hawks' winning streak is now over at 4 as they lose the Clippers on this Monday evening. We'll get into all of what transpired and what was a scoring bonanza, and we'll get into all of that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1646 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel. And right now, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more happens to win. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started with the folks at FanDuel. And also, I should encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, also YouTube on the video side. It's been a very busy week/weekend for us on the show. We had a two-part deadline preview last week with Andrew Kelly. We had game episodes on Friday night and Saturday night. It's been very busy, and it will be very busy as the deadline arrives on Thursday. But today's show will mostly focus on what became a loss for the Hawks at home. It was a close game. It was a exciting game. It was a well-played game for the most part. 149-144 at the hands of the Clippers. That ended the winning streak for the Hawks at 4 games, despite the fact that the Hawks had one of their best offensive performances of the entire season to this point. They put up 144 in regulation and had their best three-point shooting game of the season, but at the end of the night, it was not quite enough. They couldn't get enough stops all the way through this one. The Clippers are also excellent. That goes without saying, I think, for most people, but I'll just say this now. With this win, LA is now 26-5 in their last 31 games. That's number one in the league over that stretch. So there's no shame losing to the Clippers. The Hawks were underdogs in this game, even with the Clippers coming in on the second night of a back-to-back. So that tells you a little bit about the context of this game. It was a very, very tight, close game all the way through. No one had really controlled the game until like the final minute or two in favor of the Clippers. And the Hawks had a nice sort of valiant comeback effort in the final minute, and it came up just short at the end. But we'll get into all of kind of how this one unfolded. If you're a new listener, what we do is kind of go broad, and then we'll kind of dive into the particulars in the middle of the podcast. At the end of the show, we'll talk about the players and how they all played for the Hawks in this game. Both teams were actually missing their starting centers in this one. Clint Capela is going to be out for a little while, as we'll come back to later on in the podcast with more depth. Noah Zubac for the Clippers. Saddiq Bey returned here after a 1.5 game absence with an ankle sprain. But, all that said and put to the side, the big picture is that it's kind of brutal to play this well on offense and still lose. But it was really a total buzzsaw from the Clippers. They are an elite team. That's worth noting. I'll start with the Hawks defense in this game, or I guess their lack thereof in some respects. Not only is LA 26-5 in the last 31 games, but they're also number one in the league in offensive rating in that sample. And, they have 3 stars playing at a super high level. I know they have a former MVP in Russell Westbrook, but he's kind of their 4th guy, but they have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden. If 2 of those 3 guys have it going on the same night, it's tough to beat them, and that happened in this game with Kawhi and Harden. The big theme really on both ends of the floor in this game actually was the crazy, crazy shooting on both sides of the floor. LA set a season high with 21 threes in the game, and they shot 60% from 3. 60%. A lot of the looks in the first half from LA were open. So, you still have to make them. I'm certainly a proponent of shooting variance being a real thing in the NBA night to night, especially in the three-point focus league that the Hawks now play in. But the Clippers were actually able to get comfortable with the Hawks having some breakdowns in the first half defensively. And once the Hawks defense did improve, and it did improve in the second half, LA also made some contested shots. Kawhi is a monster. James Harden is a monster. And some of that is tip of the cap stuff to LA. So it was kind of a combination, broadly speaking, of not great defense and great, great, great offense. The Clippers actually shot better from 3 than from 2 in this game. If there was one positive defensively for Atlanta, it was defensive rebounding. They were actually pretty good. But the Clippers only had 8 turnovers in the entire game. The Hawks allowed 31 free throw attempts. So it all went poorly on defense, broadly speaking. Kawhi and Harden combined for 66 points. It wasn't quite the Luka 73 or the Steph Curry 60 in the building, but Kawhi was certainly Kawhi. He looked fantastic, especially late in the game. Tons of big shots. Obviously, a monster stuff. This doesn't really help Hawks fans. It's just what it is. It's hard to put it all in full context, honestly, but I think both of these things are true. Number one, the the Hawks were not as bad defensively in this game as the numbers look because of the fact the Clippers are A, awesome, and B, they just shot the ball incredibly well in this game. Number two, though, the Hawks were not good defensively. So, like, there's a little bit of both on this one. They had a lot of breakdowns in the first half in particular. They missed Capella some as far as organization is concerned. Jalen Johnson had his worst night in a long time, I thought, defensively and offensively, honestly. And without Hunter being able to close the game on a minutes restriction, the Hawks were having to play a defender or two most of the time in the fourth quarter that wasn't able to hold up. So all those things thrown in there, they were one defender short. The Clippers are awesome, and that led to obviously poor results with LA going for 149. Yes, 149 in this game. Offensively, the Hawks actually had a really good performance. I said that earlier once, but I'll say it again now. They had about a 140 offensive rating in this game. That is the second highest offensive efficiency mark for the Hawks in the entire season. And you can't realistically ask for more than that as a team collective. Not everyone was perfect, but the Hawks as a team scored 1.4 points every time down. And that's supposed to be a win, and it just wasn't in this game. Only 2 guys of the 9 who played for the Hawks made fewer than half of their shots from the field. This is a crazy stat, only 1 guy on the team that took a 3 in this game, Jalen Johnson, shot less than 42% from 3 in the game. And Jalen was 1 of 3, so it wasn't like he was a disaster either in that aspect. The Hawks were really good from the field, and they had their best 3-point shooting game of the season. Number 1 of the season with 20 made threes. Number 1 of the season with 51% from 3. So that combination is like, you should win. It's just what it is. It's like you're supposed to win those games. Because the LA was even better from 3, it didn't matter. They finally even made some corner threes. The Hawks have been, as I've said a lot the last couple of weeks, they've been really bad on corner threes, which are usually a great shot to create and then make, hopefully. In this one, they were 11 of 18 on corner threes. That's a ton of attempts, ton of makes, good process, good results, etc. They were got to the line 27 times. They made 22 of them. That's really good. They had 35 assists and 11 turnovers. Excellent ratio. More than 3-1. 19 second chance points. Like, all the numbers are really good offensively in this game. 6 guys had 16 points or more for Atlanta. The only guy in the starting lineup, or really in the top 7, that didn't have a big game on offense was Jalen Johnson. Everybody else was at least pretty good to great on offense of the key guys in this spot. In the second half, they scored 78 points and hit 12 threes and still ended up losing the second half because the Clippers had 83 points after halftime. Just a wild performance, honestly, against a pretty good defense. Now, the Clippers are not as good defensively as they are on offense, similar to the Hawks, but still a league average or above defensively team for the Clippers, and the Hawks did all of that against them, and alas, it didn't matter in the end. Just quickly here, the Hawks go 4-2 on this homestand, as we'll talk about more later on, I'm sure. They had almost a 129 offensive rating in the 6 games. That's actually just lights out ridiculous. I mentioned previously on a show or two, in January, the Hawks had a lull offensively. And that was a little bit concerning, but that is now over. They've been great offensively for the last 2 weeks, basically. The 2 losses came against teams that had insane offensive performances during this homestand. Obviously, the Luka game, and then tonight with Kawhi and Harden going nuts. They did win 3 games against pretty good teams during the stretch, and then they also played only one bad team. It was Toronto, and they won that game. So not perfect, but broadly speaking, a 4-2 homestand there with some back-to-backs mixed in, etc., is quite solid. We'll see if that carries over to Wednesday and beyond for the Hawks as the deadline looms on Thursday. But in general, my takeaway from this game, beyond the fact that the Hawks were a little bit unfortunate, but also, it was just a wild one where you ran into a kind of a buzzsaw of a team, is that the Hawks were underdogs for a reason in this game. The Clippers are better than the Hawks. They are. That's realistic. It was back-to-back. It was favorable for the Hawks in that aspect, but they were underdogs still by tip-off, and there really is no great shame in losing to a game to the Clippers by 5 points at home even. The line was 3.5, 4. So, like, basically what happened was exactly what was projected to happen. It was there were more points, and it is a little bit unsatisfying, to be sure, to shoot the way the Hawks did in this game and lose. But big picture, not a disastrous result, and a pretty good homestand on the whole. All right, we'll have more on this game coming up when it comes to the individual stuff at the end of the podcast. But before that, though, I look at the sort of ins and outs of this game, and of course, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Super Bowl Sunday is almost upon us now, only a few days away. It's also about scoring the best seat on the couch or at a party or wherever you like to actually watch football, grabbing your favorite snacks and drinks and food of any kind, and placing super bets along the way. And beyond the diehards of the football world, Super Bowl Sunday also has a great big game feel that brings in casual fans. It's basically a national holiday at this point. It's also a great time to dig in with the folks at FanDuel because there's lots of stuff to actually consume and analyze and bet across their platform. The app is safe and secure. Even beyond the NFL, they have basketball and baseball and hockey and soccer and golf, tennis, auto racing, MMA, and much more. In fact, there are so many different ways to actually end the season with a W at FanDuel, or 2 Ws, 3 Ws, etc. Not only can you bet who's actually going to win the big game, but also FanDuel has operations and bets on which players are going to score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, all kinds of player props, and so much more. And if you're a new customer, join up right now today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more happens to win. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with the folks at FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And one more time, the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, so we'll dive in now to how this game kind of unfolded on all sides. The Hawks actually started well in this game with 5 points in the first 2 possessions of the game. There was a massive dunk by Okongwu who started in place of Capella in this game, and then Jalen hit a corner 3. By the way, Trae Young tied Luka Blaylock's mark, number 2 all-time in career assists for the Hawks on that play, and then actually passed it comfortably. So Trae Young, at the age of 25, is number 2 all-time for the Hawks in assists. Notable stuff there. Anyway, after that was the single biggest run of the entire game, which is going to sound crazy because it was literally right out of the gate. The Clippers went on a 16-2 run in the first quarter. And it was basically they were getting open shots. The shot quality was really high. I mentioned this earlier on sort of the broad takeaways section. The defense was worse in the first half than the second, despite the fact the Clippers actually scored more points after halftime than they did before halftime. The Hawks also went 1-6 from the floor with 2 turnovers in that stretch as well, leading to a 16-2 run. And the rest of the game, the Hawks were down as many as 13, but the rest of the game was pretty much nip and tuck. Like, there were some 8-0 runs on all sides, but like nothing crazy other than that one big haymaker from the Clippers at the beginning of the game. Trae got a technical foul in this game after a reaction to a call. That's his 9th of the year. You could only have 15 before you are suspended. 16 is a one-game suspension. So he's on pace to not be suspended, but he is top 4 in the league in technical fouls. You don't love that necessarily, and he's obviously an emotional guy with the refs, so keep an eye on that as the season progresses. The Hawks were down 9 in the first quarter because of the offense the Clippers had. The Hawks played 9 guys in this one. It was essentially what you would expect with Capella out. It was Bogey and Hunter as the 2 primary backups because Hunter is not quite ready to start yet with the minutes restriction, and then it was Bruno Fernando as the backup center with Okongwu starting, and then Wes Matthews was the kind of plug-and-play, very low usage. He only played 6 minutes in this game. By the way, I'll say it again later, DeAndre Hunter looked really good right away physically compared to what he looked like on Saturday. I noted Saturday he was a little bit uneasy. Like, it wasn't like he looked terrible, but he was a little bit uncomfortable, it seemed like, and tonight there was none of that. He played great. He was probably their brightest spot individually in this game. The Hawks, though, I mean, this is kind of crazy. The Clippers started out 10 of 14 from 3. Now, they never actually cooled off, but it wasn't quite as crazy as that the rest of the game, alas. There was a nice run by the Hawks in the middle of the quarter when Hunter and Murray actually combined for 6 straight points. A couple good drives from Jalen Johnson, but as a theme in this game, Jalen, who had the worst night of anyone for the Hawks, just was weirdly trying to be a little bit too crafty around the rim, like just not quite enough power, and just missed a lot of those, scoops and, off-balance shots around the rim. He had a rough one. He was actually 2 of 11 on 2s in this game. Kind of shockingly bad from him. The Hawks were actually down 8 with a minute to go in the first half, and then went on an 8-0 run to tie the game before halftime. They got some help. There's a missed layup and a traveling call on the Clippers, but when Trae sort of scored at the very end of the quarter, a nice bounce back. Defensively, they improved in the second quarter, and they were back in the game at that point, being tied at halftime. The entire third quarter was just bonkers. Really, the whole second half was bonkers, to be honest. There were lots of fireworks on all sides of this one. Okongwu hit a corner 3. He actually had a couple of interesting fouls, but they were hanging around. Trae made back-to-back threes at one point. Bruno went crazy about a foul call that was actually on Jalen Johnson, which I didn't know at the time. Nobody did. Quinn challenged it, ended up winning it, kind of surprisingly, because it wasn't actually on Bruno, but an odd play in the third quarter. Hunter stayed hot. Actually, he made all 5 shots that he took in the third quarter. And after 3 quarters, DeAndre Hunter had 25 points in 17 minutes. Crazy. For a guy off the bench, no less. And then the Hawks gave up a buzzer-beating 3 to Daniel Tice, the backup center for the Clippers. That was kind of a bad beat at the end of the third quarter. In the fourth, more madness. So it was a 47-43 fourth quarter. Bruno had a huge dunk on the first play, actually, of the fourth quarter. And just as a note, like, he has incredibly fresh legs. Like, a lot of these guys have played a lot of basketball, but Bruno hasn't played a lot. And I think that was kind of evident here. Like, he was kind of nervous energy in a lot of ways. Like, he was really kind of flying around, and mostly in a good way. But it was just a reminder, like, guys that don't play a lot of minutes have the freshest legs of anybody around. He sort of showed that in this game. Ironically, for what I just said, this game was 47-43 in the fourth quarter. There was a stretch to begin the fourth quarter where the two teams combined to shoot 5 of 16 from the field. So it was a little bit frantic. It was certainly fast paced. The shooting was not crazy until later on. The Clippers kind of had it going first. DeJounte, though, had a big fourth quarter for the Hawks. He actually hit back-to-back threes and got back within 4. This is a crazy stat. No team led by more than 4 points for 14 minutes straight. So from the middle of the third quarter until late in the fourth quarter, the entire game was within 4 points. Mostly Clippers leading by less than 4, but it was really just right there, as tight as it possibly could have been, for more than a quarter's worth of play. And then LA went up a little bit. Bay actually had a big 3 that was notable to me. Jalen Johnson had a pretty bad possession defensively after that, though. He kind of broke down against Westbrook. That kind of had me and Kevin Schnarr shaking our heads on press row. I'm not sure what he was doing there. Then Jalen left, it is what it is. Trey got caught on an island with Kawhi, led to a bucket. It was some rough stuff there. DeJounte had a jump shot, though. He was still really good offensively in that fourth quarter. And then Kawhi hit a big 3 at the buzzer, a tough shot. The Hawks turned it over. It led to a fast break layup, and then Atlanta is down 9 in a hurry. Now, DeJounte gets them back in it with a 3-shot foul, makes all 3, and they had to get a stop. So they're down 6, 1:30-ish to go. James Harden gets caught in a really difficult spot. Trae Young, good job defensively. He was sort of all up in his grill on the right wing as the shot clock's going down. But then Harden makes what I would describe as a very, very difficult shot off the glass for 3. And then Trae gets called for a foul for a 4-point play. And that was like what should have been the dagger of the game. Now, I might have challenged it if I was Quinn. There's two schools of thought there. Number one is, if they only overturned the foul, the shot went in. So it would have been only a 1-point swing, not a huge thing there. They could have challenged it thinking that Harden had an unnatural shooting motion, which I would have kind of agreed with. I don't think he would have won it, to be honest, but it was an odd play. Just a kind of a bad beat. I mean, a good microcosm of the night, though. Clippers just kind of making everything. Harden makes an impossible shot off the glass. It's a foul, huge thing, and they're down by 10. And honestly, it would have taken a miracle to overcome that, but they almost pulled it off. The next 30 seconds or so went great for the Hawks. They cut it down from 10 to 6 with the ball, based on a Saddiq Bey 3-point play, a missed free throw, etc., etc. Then Bogey hits a 3 to cut it down to 3. So the Hawks, after being down 10 and seemingly dead, they're within 3 with 26 seconds to go. Now that number is important, the 26, because I got a lot of questions about this. I'm not sure. I thought it was pretty obvious, but some people didn't see it as I did. But there was about a 1.5-2-second differential between the shot clock and the game clock. And the Hawks are down by 3 points. And crucially, they did not have a timeout. Now, I think even with a timeout, they still probably would have had to foul. But without a timeout, they absolutely had to foul. So people are wondering why the Hawks did foul here. I think what you should do, in my opinion, there is try to get a steal quickly. If you can get one, that's great. If you can't get one, you have to foul. My only qualm there was that the Hawks waited a little bit too long to actually foul. But big picture, like, you have to foul there. In my opinion, it's not even close. They of course did after they didn't get the steal. Harden makes both, and that kind of ends the game. So I get that it was like anticlimactic because the Hawks were kind of back in the game, and then fouling there, having to foul Harden was tough. They should have fouled earlier, but like, foul versus no foul is not even close because they don't, again, no timeout, and the differential is like, basically what could have happened there is if you don't foul, LA could take a shot at the buzzer and then you never even have the ball. Like, if they shoot a 3 with 1 to go, the game's over. Like, you're dead at that point. So You got to foul, give them a chance to miss free throws. Obviously, it's not likely to happen. That's part of the problem when you're down by 10 late in the game. But yeah, I mean, at the end of that, like they had some big shots late to get back into it. The biggest shot of the game, like sort of like probability wise, was either the Kawhi three to go from 4-7 with 2 minutes to go, or perhaps the Harden 4-point play. One of the two. Those were the two biggest shots. They both went to LA. And again, like that's kind of the way this game went. It was unfortunate, but that's the way this game flow went. And the Hawks, just as good as they played on offense, they just couldn't overcome what was an onslaught from LA throughout the game. And we'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll have more coming up on the Capella injury, as well as the players who performed in this game, etc., etc. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show. This segment is brought to you by the folks at BetterHelp. Sometimes we actually need an opportunity to get something off of our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that stuff out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. And today, I want to actually tell you about how I feel about something. You might be thinking the same thing or something like that, and that is that I have some fear about the trade deadline coming up this week for the Hawks. It can go in any direction, but I'm talking more specifically about whether it's the right set of moves, of course, but also whether I'll be able to act quickly enough to break it all down on the podcast, get the podcast out quickly, whether my shows will actually be good and what listeners want to hear, etc. It's a whole batch of worrying for me. And of course, this is absolutely not the most intense or life-altering topic, but therapy can be different for everybody involved. Most of us, including me, have much bigger problems. It's stuff actually involving sports teams, but it's also quite important to get things off of our chest every once in a while, no matter what it happens to be. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try right now today. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, and the place to go is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. One more time, the place to go is betterhelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, and before we dive into the guys who actually played in this game, a quick update on Clint Capela, who I mentioned earlier. He of course, played very well, actually, on Saturday. 17 points, 15 rebounds in 25 minutes. He looked great in the first half. He didn't close the game, which I thought was basketball-related, because the Congo was playing great as well, and the Warriors were playing small, but the Hawks indicated Sunday that Capela had some discomfort late in the game, had an MRI on Sunday, and then he actually has a left adductor strain, which is a muscle injury. His timeline for reevaluation is 7 to 10 days. So he'll be at least out for 4 games, including tonight, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. It could be longer than that because reevaluation does not mean return. It could be longer than that. And that means, of course, he's going to be out till the deadline. Now, he can be traded still. People are asking me on Twitter about physicals, all that stuff. Teams would have to obviously sign off on this, and they all know he's hurt. It's public information, but he obviously still can be traded. We'll see. He's also a veteran. Like, it's not like there's a huge mystery on what he actually is. And just to say this, like, he's not the same guy he used to be, but he's played in 47 now of the 49 or 50 games the Hawks have played. He's still a good defender. He's the best offensive rebounder in the entire league this year. So, like, he's still a guy that's valuable around the league. On the other hand, I will always say this, I always do, the Hawks are better suited to sort of hold up without their starting center than most teams are. Okongwu is a really, 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 really good backup who's also like starter quality, in my opinion, at least low-end starter quality right now. But he's arguably a top 3 or 4 backup center in the league. So to have that guy on your team is very helpful with Capella being out. And then Bruno isn't like a spectacular player, but for him to be their third center is a pretty good spot to be in. So there's that. Obviously, you know, short-term, long-term, you want Capella to be in there. He does make them better. I know that there's a movement in some circles that say they'd be quote-unquote better without Capella. That's not true. But obviously they are better set up than most teams because they have Conwood and Fernando behind him. And as for the trade stuff, it's one big TBD right now. I'll say that probably later on in the week as well on different shows. The Hawks are in a spot right now, broadly beyond Capella, where they could kind of do different things. They could hold, they could sell, they could trade Murray, they could trade Hunter, they could trade Capella, they could trade Bay or Griffin or whatever, or they can kind of be very quiet. We'll kind of see. Lots of different mixed messaging right now, which is kind of the nature of the game. This time of year, you're going to get lied to no matter what you do. So we'll see is the TBD answer on that front. Okay, to the actual game itself and the players tonight. 9 guys really appeared for the Hawks, only really 8.5. Wes Matthews played 6 minutes. Played well, I thought, actually. Made his 1-3, had an assist, had a steal. Gave them 5 minutes. I think the Hawks might have played 8 guys if Hunter was actually available for his full minutes. But with him only limited to 19, they had Wes play a little bit, and that was just fine. Bruno Fernando was the backup center. 14 minutes, 7 points, 4 rebounds, 2 blocks. He was a little bit overeager a few times, had one really, really bad, like Capella-like miss around the rim, I have to say, as I should joke about that. I thought he was fine, though. Good energy, reasonable defense along the way, and I thought he played pretty solid backup center minutes. DeAndre Hunter was a huge story in this game. So Hunter led the Hawks in scoring while playing 19 minutes. Just for reference, 5 guys from the Hawks played 33 minutes or more, and the leading scorer played 19 minutes because he shot the heck out of the ball. He had 27 points in 19 minutes. He was 7 of 7 on twos, 3 of 5 on threes, 4 of 5 at the free throw line, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Hunter was awesome. He really was. He looked more assertive and more comfortable physically. He shot the ball great. I actually asked a little bit after the game about what if it's any different when you know you're going to play less minutes, and Hunter just kind of deadpan and said, "I know I'm going to shoot the ball every time," which is kind of funny. But he really did shoot the heck out of the ball. And then defensively, I said it during the game, I think it's not like a huge hot take to say this, he is by far their best defensive option on any big wing. You know, Jalen Johnson has done a really good job at times this year, but as far as craft and experience are concerned, Hunter's still their best option on as a one-on-one defender against any big wing in the league, and that means guys like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And we saw that a little bit in this game, just couldn't play him as much. Quinn gave a pretty vague answer when I asked him pregame about DeAndre's progression as far as minutes are concerned. Obviously, though, they would have liked to play him more in this game. They just kind of couldn't. So we'll see what the limit kind of arrives at in the near future. But for now, he was very limited, but he played great. And without him, they would have lost by 15 points, I think. He was that good. He was very, very valuable in this game. Bogey had a solid one offensively in particular, 16.6 assists and 3 rebounds. For Bogey at 4 threes. I will say defensively, it's often not great, but it was particularly notably shaky in this one for Bogey, but still offensively he was really good. And the bench was solid, +4 for Bogey in his minutes. To the starters. I'll start with the one guy who did not play well, and that was Jalen Johnson. So Jalen Johnson had, I think, a game to forget. Just to be clear, if you're a new listener, I'm very high on Jalen. I love that draft pick. He's been really good this year. He had a nightmare game. He was really, really rough. Even defensively, like, obviously he had a tough assignment, so that goes without saying. Having to guard Kawhi or PG most of the night is tough sledding. But he had a really rough defensive game, lots of mistakes and breakdowns. And then offensively, 2 of 11 on twos. He just couldn't finish around the rim. His hands were kind of weird in this one. He did have 5 assists, which is a nice number, but I thought he was a mess. And if Hunter had been available, they couldn't really take him out of the game either. Like, he played, if not the most minutes, actually, yeah, he led the team in minutes, which makes sense given where they were with Hunter, but he just had he had a bad game. Nothing to worry about, just one of those nights for Jalen Johnson. Saddiq Bey made some shots in this one. 33 minutes, 18 points, 5 rebounds, hit 3 of 6 from 3. Nice to see that breakout. He's been shooting the ball very poorly. Of course, he missed the game. He missed a game on Saturday and about half a game on Friday. So he looked healthy-ish to me. He's very durable. It's one of the big things about Saddiq is that he does not like to miss games. Quinn talked about that a lot. It's very obvious, but made some shots. Defensively, he's overmatched in this matchup, but certainly get good effort, good physicality, etc. Okongwu, 18 points, 5 rebounds. I think he didn't score in the fourth. Maybe he did, but I think he had 18 in the middle of the third quarter at one point. But 6 of 8 from 2. Made both of his three-point attempts in this game. Not great rebounding game necessarily, but I thought he played well. I don't think he was dominant, but he played well. Trey, 25 and 12. A couple of shaky turnovers, but nothing out of the ordinary with 5. That's a kind of normal number for a number 1 option. He was 5 of 7 on 2s, 3 of 7 from 3. That's the last 6 times, made all 6, so he was efficient. Not his best game, for sure, but he was okay. DeJounte, not super efficient, 21 points on 4 of 11 from 2, 3 of 7 from 3. He was about 1 point per shot, which is fine. 7 assists for DeJounte. Actually, got a couple of really nice passes, I thought, in this game, and was at least competitive-ish on Harden. Not his best. He was the only other guy other than Jalen who did not shoot the ball well, but still, he was fine. He made a bunch of shots in the second half to keep them in line as well. So there you go. So individually, I think Jalen was the only guy that I would think played below his normal baseline. Bogey's defense maybe, Bay's defense maybe, but Trey was about what he normally would be. DeJounte, same. Okongwu was pretty good. Hunter was great. So yeah, nothing really to nitpick. And again, it kind of brings it full circle that the Clippers are just better right now than the Hawks are. I know it's unsatisfying, but it's true. And we'll leave it there for now. By the way, I should say this out loud. I forgot to say it earlier. Trey was the winner of the Eastern Conference Player of the Week award for last week. So he was the number 1 guy in the East last week when the Hawks went 3-0. He actually averaged 31 and 11 in those 3 games and led the East in assists and threes and top 5 in steals. over that period. So obviously it helps when you go 3-0, you get more attention, but he's been playing great. And it wasn't quite as good tonight, but still was pretty good. And obviously that's a pretty big deal to win a Conference Player of the Week award against all kinds of competition that the Hawks are facing at this time of year. Anyway, that's all I have at the end of this podcast. We'll have more to come. The Hawks do play again on Wednesday in Boston, a very tough spot. Boston is the number 1 seed in the East right now. They are 23-3, I believe, at home this season. So nothing easy about that game. That goes without saying. But we'll see how they fare in that one. And then, of course, in between that game and a road game on Friday in Philadelphia is the deadline. So Thursday at 3 p.m. is the deadline, and I'll have coverage of that. The Hawks could make a trade between now and then. They could make a trade on that day. They could do nothing at all. Just stay tuned, I would say. Please subscribe to this show anywhere you get your podcasts, or preferably more than one place. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. I write about the Hawks, share audio, etc. at patreon.com/BT Rowland as well. And yeah, it might be a busy week for us. We'll see. I will sprint into action as fast as possible if they make a transaction. And if nothing else, I'll have more content coming to you at the very latest after the game on Wednesday evening in Boston. And until then, we'll see you all next time.